2/3 of the people of Yemen now need humanitarian aid. That's the estimate from UN officials looking at the costs of the country's escalating conflict. They say Yemen could face famine this year unless immediate action is taken. Well, with me now is Jamie McGoldrick, the United Nations humanitarian coordinator for Yemen. Jamie, we will be showing some pictures, very recent pictures of some of the children affected by the lack of food. It looks so bad, but are you saying it could get worse?
Well, it will get worse because the problem is that the economy is in really bad shape. The banking sector doesn't function. Wheat importers are struggling to bring the economy up with the food back into the country. We in the UN are struggling to get funds to address that emergency. And all signs are that the situation can only get worse.
Why is there such a problem getting funds? I mean, Yemen is being overlooked.
Well, Yemen is overlooked because it competes with the Syrias of this world and the Iraqs. You've got Aleppo and you've got Mosul. Those are very headline-grabbing countries. I mean, for us, because of the geopolitical nature of Yemen and the countries involved in Yemen, the crisis, it's very hard to get the attention. And on top of that, media don't get the chance to come in because there's restrictions on flights. There are no flights into Sanaa airport except the UN flights, and the journalists are banned from using that by Saudi Arabia.
And the pictures that we've been showing come from UNICEF, the children's charity, but is it hard even for you to get up-to-date reports on exactly what's happening and who's affected?
Well, I was there 3 days ago. I just came out, and everywhere you go, you see people begging on the streets in bigger numbers. You see people rummaging through rubbish to survive. You hear catastrophic stories of children dying because they can't get to health centres. People dying of malnutrition, people dying of preventable diseases, and that's because everything is collapsing. There's no money coming into the country. The humanitarians are struggling with a very big caseload, and that caseload is getting bigger. Last year we did 6 million people, and next year we have to do 10 million, and that's the ones in acute need. That's the ones we know right now. And with the situation deteriorating so badly, those numbers can only escalate. And we find ourselves in a very difficult situation to try and get money for this crisis. At the same time, the commercial sector, which is the biggest supplier of food, can't get lines of credit in the open market because the banking sector doesn't work.
I suppose one of the issues is that the refugees from Yemen are fleeing, trying to get out if they can, but they're not flooding across to Europe in the same way as Syrian refugees have, for example. I'm trying to say rather crudely, I suppose, it's a visibility problem too.
Well, there's a visibility and a profile problem. I mean, the fact that you don't have Yemenis washing up on the shores of Greece or Italy means that they're not in the same mix as the Syrian refugees. But I think it's also more than that. I think it's a neglected or a media blacked out country because it suits the purposes of those countries involved. Not to have that reminder of fighting a war in the poorest country in the Arab world, pitted against a coalition of some of the richest and strongest. And it's a war that's unfortunate, it's a war that's unfair, and I think the people in Yemen are suffering terribly because of it. 18 million people are struggling and 10 million are really struggling. There's 460,000 children who don't know where the next meal comes from. 1 in 10 child dies every 10 minutes in Yemen from a disease that's preventable, be it from a chronic disease or pneumonia, and it's all based on the fact that they don't have the services, the supply, don't have the food.
You speak about very powerful interests here, and it is in a sense a proxy conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia, isn't it?
Well, I think that's the way it's pitched as for the domestic market, but I think it's not as simple as that. It's not as binary as that. I think what the problem is the fact that Yemen is a country that's been the poorest in the world, has been a deficit of development, a deficit in governance for years, and all of a sudden they find themselves in a war with the strongest country in the region, and it's a very imbalanced struggle, and they've struggled to try and fight that war, but more importantly, the consequences of the impact of that war on the people is forgotten.
One final point, Jamie, about the way that aid can help, because we've talked about malnutrition, but for example, cholera was starting to really take hold, and aid helped to turn that round.
Yeah, we were able to stem the flow and the outbreak of cholera, that's for sure. Next month we're launching an appeal for $2 billion. That's to address the needs of those 10 million people. Last year we got 60% response to our appeal. This year we need much more because the crisis is at a much deeper magnitude, and the international community, the donor community, have to recognise that. We've got evidence to show that if they don't step in a bigger way, we're going to have a massive problem in our future.
Jamie McGoldrick, thanks for coming to talk to us.
Thank you.